Maya never imagined that wearing her favorite sundress to an exclusive boutique would lead to the most powerful man in the Middle East acquiring her tormentor's entire fashion empire. When that arrogant store owner decided she wasn't worthy of shopping there, she had no idea Maya's fiancé controlled billions in oil money. What happened next changed everything in ways nobody saw coming. Maya Rodriguez had always been different from other women in her social circle. While her friends obsessed over designer labels and Instagram-worthy outfits, she found beauty in simplicity. Her closet was filled with flowing sundresses from local markets, comfortable sandals worn smooth from countless walks, and vintage jewelry she'd collected from her travels around the world as a freelance photographer. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Her fiancé, Khalid al-Mansouri, was one of the wealthiest men alive, though few people knew his face. Unlike the flashy billionaires who craved media attention, Khalid preferred shadows and boardrooms. He controlled vast oil reserves, shipping companies, and real estate empires across 3 continents, but he dressed modestly and drove himself in simple cars. Their relationship had bloomed during one of Maya's photography assignments in Dubai, where she'd been documenting traditional markets for a travel magazine. That Tuesday morning started with unusual excitement. Maya had been planning something special for weeks. Khalid's birthday was approaching, and she wanted to surprise him with a custom-tailored suit from Meridian Fashion House, the most exclusive boutique in the city. She'd heard their craftsmanship was legendary, with waiting lists stretching months for appointments. Maya had managed to secure a consultation through a friend's connection, and she was thrilled to finally do something luxurious for the man who gave her everything but asked for nothing in return. She chose her favorite yellow sundress, the one with tiny white flowers that Khalid always said brought out the warmth in her brown eyes. Her long, dark hair fell in natural waves past her shoulders, and she wore minimal makeup because she'd never needed much. The silver bracelet on her wrist was a gift from her grandmother, worn and precious in ways that had nothing to do with its modest value. Maya felt beautiful and confident as she walked toward the boutique, imagining Khalid's surprise when she presented him with something truly special. The morning sun cast everything in golden light as she made her way downtown. She had taken the subway instead of calling for one of Khalid's drivers, preferring the independence and normalcy of public transportation. Maya had grown up middle class in a small town, and despite her engagement to one of the richest men in the world, she still felt most comfortable living simply. Money hadn't changed her values or her desire to remain grounded in the real world. Meridian Fashion House occupied an entire corner building in the most expensive shopping district. Floor-to-ceiling windows displayed a single mannequin wearing what looked like a work of art rather than clothing. The boutique's interior was all white marble and soft lighting, designed to make customers feel they were entering a temple of fashion rather than a store. Maya had never been somewhere so intimidating, but she reminded herself that she belonged anywhere she chose to be. The moment she stepped inside, Maya felt the weight of judgmental stares. Other customers, all impeccably dressed women carrying handbags worth more than most people's monthly salaries, looked at her up and down with barely concealed disdain. Their eyes lingered on her simple dress, her worn leather sandals, her lack of obvious designer accessories. Maya held her head high, focusing on her mission rather than their opinions. A young sales associate named Jennifer approached with a genuine smile. She appeared to be in her early 20s, with kind eyes and a welcoming demeanor that immediately put Maya at ease. Jennifer wore the boutique's signature black uniform, but her warmth made her stand out from the cold elegance surrounding them. She asked how she could help, her voice carrying none of the condescension Maya had expected. Maya explained her appointment for a custom men's suit consultation, mentioning the name of the friend who'd arranged the meeting. Jennifer's face lit up with recognition, and she began pulling up the appointment system on her tablet. Everything seemed to be going perfectly until a shadow fell across their conversation. Victoria Sterling emerged from the back office like a storm cloud in designer clothing. She was tall and sharp-featured, with platinum blonde hair pulled into a severe chignon that added to her intimidating presence. Her black dress probably cost more than Maya's monthly rent, and every piece of jewelry on her body screamed wealth and status. Victoria owned Meridian Fashion House and had built her reputation on catering exclusively to the ultra-wealthy. She looked at Maya with the same expression someone might reserve for finding garbage on their doorstep. Without greeting or introduction, Victoria interrupted Jennifer's work with a curt question about whether Maya was lost. The words carried such venom that other customers turned to watch the interaction. Maya politely explained her appointment, keeping her voice steady despite the sudden tension crackling through the air. Victoria's laugh was sharp and humorless, designed to cut rather than express joy. Victoria announced that there had been a mistake, that Meridian Fashion House served only serious clients with appropriate budgets. She gestured dismissively at Maya's outfit, suggesting that someone dressed so casually clearly couldn't afford their services. The cruelty in her voice was matched by the satisfaction in her eyes, as if humiliating Maya was providing genuine entertainment. Maya felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she maintained her composure. She reached into her simple canvas bag and withdrew her credit card, explaining quietly that money wasn't an issue. The card was matte black with minimal text, unremarkable to most people but recognizable to those familiar with private banking for the ultra-wealthy. Victoria's eyes widened slightly when she saw it, but rather than backing down, she seemed to become even more aggressive. The boutique owner claimed the appointment system must have malfunctioned, that Maya's name wasn't in their records despite Jennifer's confirmation moments earlier. She made a show of checking her tablet, shaking her head dramatically and announcing that they were fully booked for months. Other customers were openly staring now, some even pulling out phones to record what was clearly becoming a spectacle. Victoria's voice grew louder and more theatrical as she declared that Meridian Fashion House maintained certain standards. She spoke about their clientele as if they were royalty, emphasizing that their reputation depended on exclusivity and discretion. The implication was clear. Maya didn't belong in their world, and her presence somehow diminished the boutique's prestige. Jennifer looked mortified by her boss's behavior, clearly wanting to intervene, but knowing she couldn't challenge Victoria without losing her job. The young woman's distress was visible as she watched a legitimate customer being humiliated for no reason other than her employer's prejudices. The situation escalated when Victoria demanded to see Maya's identification and credit card information, claiming she needed to verify that the card wasn't stolen. The accusation hung in the air like poison, implying that someone who looked like Maya couldn't possibly have legitimate access to such wealth. Other customers gasped at the boldness of the suggestion, though whether from shock or agreement was unclear. Maya complied with quiet dignity, producing her identification and allowing Victoria to examine her credentials.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Every document confirmed her identity and her right to be there, but Victoria seemed determined to find fault regardless of evidence. She made a show of scrutinizing everything, holding items up to the light as if checking for forgeries. When Victoria couldn't find any problems with Maya's documentation, she shifted tactics. She announced that the boutique's insurance policy required additional verification for large purchases, claiming this was standard procedure for new clients. The lie was transparent to anyone paying attention, but Victoria delivered it with such authority that some customers seemed to accept it as legitimate policy. Maya stood in the center of the boutique, surrounded by whispers and stares, feeling smaller with each passing moment. Victoria's performance was designed to break her spirit and force her to leave voluntarily. The boutique owner was clearly experienced at this type of psychological warfare, using shame and public humiliation as weapons to protect her exclusive domain. The final insult came when Victoria suggested that Maya might be more comfortable shopping at department stores in the mall. She recommended several chain stores by name, her tone dripping with condescension as she explained that those places were better suited to Maya's obvious budget and style preferences. The words were chosen carefully to maximize pain while maintaining plausible deniability. Maya felt tears threatening to fall, but she refused to give Victoria the satisfaction of seeing her break completely. She gathered her documents with steady hands, thanked Jennifer for her kindness, and walked toward the exit with as much grace as she could manage. Behind her, Victoria was already dismissing the incident to other customers, making jokes about people who didn't understand their place in the world. The boutique's glass doors felt heavier than they should have as Maya pushed through them back onto the busy sidewalk. The contrast between the cool, perfumed air inside and the warm city atmosphere outside was jarring. She stood there for a moment, processing what had just happened and trying to understand why someone would choose cruelty over kindness when nothing was at stake except ego. Maya walked slowly to a nearby coffee shop, ordering a simple latte and finding a quiet corner table where she could collect herself. The familiar ritual of drinking coffee helped calm her nerves, but the humiliation still burned in her chest. She kept replaying Victoria's words, wondering if she'd somehow brought this treatment on herself by dressing too casually or not projecting enough confidence. After 20 minutes of internal debate, Maya decided to call Khalid. She typically handled her own problems without involving him, but this felt different somehow. The injustice of it bothered her more than the personal slight, and she wanted to share the experience with someone who would understand her perspective. She dialed his private number, knowing he always answered when she called, regardless of meetings or obligations. Khalid's voice was warm and concerned when he heard the distress in her tone. Maya found herself recounting every detail of the encounter, from Victoria's initial dismissal to the final insult about shopping at mall stores. She described the other customers' reactions, Jennifer's obvious discomfort, and her own feelings of inadequacy in the face of such concentrated disdain. As Maya spoke, she could hear Khalid's breathing change. His questions became more specific and pointed, asking for details about the boutique's name, location, and the owner's full identity. She provided everything she could remember, including Victoria's appearance and the exact words she'd used during their confrontation. Khalid's voice remained calm throughout the conversation, but Maya detected an undercurrent of something cold and dangerous beneath his supportive tone. When she finished her story, Khalid was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke in the voice she'd only heard him use during the most serious business calls, when billions of dollars hung in the balance of his decisions. He told Maya he loved her and that she should go home and try to relax. He promised that everything would be handled appropriately, though he didn't elaborate on what that meant. Maya felt better after talking to Khalid, but she still couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had shifted during her conversation with Victoria. She'd been treated as less than human simply because her appearance didn't match someone else's expectations of wealth and status. The experience had revealed something ugly about how people were judged and dismissed based on superficial characteristics rather than their actual worth as human beings. The rest of her day passed quietly, but Maya couldn't stop thinking about Jennifer's distressed expression and Victoria's satisfied smile. She wondered how many other people had been subjected to similar treatment and whether anyone had ever challenged Victoria's behavior effectively. The boutique owner seemed so confident in her power to exclude and humiliate, as if she had never faced real consequences for her actions. That evening, Maya decided not to mention the incident to Khalid again when he returned from work. She'd already shared the story and didn't want to dwell on negativity when they had so little time together. Khalid seemed unusually distracted during dinner, checking his phone more frequently than usual and making several brief calls in Arabic that she couldn't understand. When Maya asked about his day, Khalid's answers were shorter than normal. He seemed to be thinking about something important, weighing decisions that would have far-reaching consequences. She recognized the signs from previous occasions when he'd been considering major business moves. His mind was clearly focused on strategies and outcomes that extended far beyond their conversation. After dinner, Khalid spent hours in his home office making international calls. She could hear the murmur of his voice through the closed door, the tone serious and commanding. She fell asleep before he came to bed, but she woke briefly when she felt him slide under the covers beside her. Even in sleep, she could sense the tension in his body, as if he were a coiled spring waiting to be released. Maya woke the next morning to find Khalid already gone, which was unusual since he typically waited to have breakfast with her before starting his day. A note on his pillow explained that he had urgent business to handle but would call her later. The message was written in his careful handwriting, but something about it felt different from his usual communications. As she prepared for her own day, Maya found herself thinking again about Victoria Sterling and Meridian Fashion House. She wondered if she should have handled the situation differently, perhaps demanding to speak to a manager or refusing to leave without service. The more she considered it, the more she realized that Victoria's behavior hadn't just been rude or unprofessional, it had been deliberately cruel and potentially discriminatory. Maya spent the morning editing photographs from a recent assignment, but her concentration kept drifting back to the boutique encounter. She'd been subjected to public humiliation for no reason other than Victoria's prejudices and desire to maintain some artificial sense of exclusivity. The injustice of it continued to bother her, especially knowing that other people had witnessed the incident without speaking up. By afternoon, Maya had convinced herself that she should simply forget about the whole experience and move on with her life. Victoria Sterling wasn't worth her emotional energy, and dwelling on negativity would only make her feel worse. She decided to focus on positive things instead, like planning Khalid's birthday celebration and working on her photography projects. However, as Maya tried to put the incident behind her, she couldn't shake the feeling that something important was about to happen. Khalid's unusual behavior and mysterious business calls suggested that he was planning something significant. She'd learned to trust her instincts about these things, and her instincts were telling her that Victoria Sterling's world was about to change in ways the boutique owner couldn't possibly imagine. The next morning brought news that would shake the fashion industry to its core.
While Maya was still processing her humiliation from the day before, Khalid had been orchestrating something unprecedented in the business world. At precisely 9 o'clock, he walked into the offices of Sterling Fashion Group, Victoria's parent company, carrying documents that would change everything. Khalid had spent the entire night on conference calls with his legal team, financial advisors, and investment bankers across 3 continents. By dawn, he had assembled the most aggressive acquisition strategy his empire had ever attempted. Sterling Fashion Group, which owned Meridian Fashion House and 12 other luxury boutiques, was about to face a hostile takeover from a buyer they never saw coming. Victoria Sterling arrived at her flagship boutique that morning, feeling particularly satisfied with herself. She'd successfully maintained her store's exclusivity by removing another unworthy customer, and the incident had even provided entertainment for her regular clients. She had no way of knowing that her actions the previous day had triggered a chain of events that would destroy everything she'd built over 15 years in the fashion industry. The first sign something was wrong came when Victoria's assistant rushed into her office looking panicked. The young woman could barely speak as she explained that reporters were gathering outside the boutique, asking questions about a major business acquisition. Victoria felt a flutter of concern, but assumed it was probably related to one of her competitors. She had no enemies powerful enough to threaten her position in the luxury retail world. Within an hour, Victoria's confidence began to crumble. Her accountant called to report that several major suppliers had suddenly terminated their exclusive contracts without explanation. Her lawyers were fielding calls about lease violations and contractual disputes that had never existed before. Most disturbing of all, her bank was requesting immediate meetings about her business credit lines and loan agreements. The boutique's atmosphere grew tense as staff members whispered among themselves about the strange morning developments. Jennifer, the kind sales associate who had tried to help Maya, noticed that several longtime customers had canceled their appointments without explanation. Something was clearly happening behind the scenes, but nobody could figure out what or why. Victoria's phone rang constantly with calls from business partners, suppliers, and industry contacts, all asking the same questions about rumors of a takeover. She denied everything, insisting that Sterling Fashion Group was privately held and not for sale. However, her confidence wavered when she learned that someone had been quietly purchasing shares from minority investors at prices well above market value. By noon, the truth began to emerge. A representative from Al Mansouri Holdings arrived at Victoria's office with an acquisition offer that took her breath away. The company was prepared to purchase Sterling Fashion Group for an amount that was simultaneously generous and terrifying. The offer was structured in a way that gave Victoria no real choice in the matter, as her minority shareholders had already agreed to sell their stakes. Victoria had never heard of Al Mansouri Holdings, but a quick internet search revealed the scope of Khalid's business empire. Oil refineries, shipping companies, real estate developments, and luxury hotels across the Middle East and Europe. The man's net worth was estimated in the tens of billions, making him one of the most powerful businessmen most people had never heard of. Victoria realized with growing horror that she had somehow attracted the attention of someone completely beyond her ability to fight. The acquisition documents were presented with cold professionalism. Al-Mansouri Holdings would assume control of all Sterling Fashion Group properties, contracts, and operations within 72 hours. Victoria would be retained as a consultant during the transition period, but her role as owner and chief executive would end immediately. The terms were non-negotiable, and legal challenges would be both expensive and futile given the resources arrayed against her. Victoria's hands shook as she read through the paperwork. Everything she had built, every relationship she had cultivated, every exclusive contract she had negotiated was now subject to the whims of a stranger. She tried to understand how this had happened so quickly and why someone with Khalid's resources would want her relatively small fashion business. The answer came in a footnote that made her blood run cold. The acquisition was being undertaken on behalf of Maya Rodriguez, identified in the documents as Khalid al-Mansouri's fiancée and the future owner of the fashion group. Victoria's mind raced back to the previous day's encounter, trying to remember every detail of her interaction with the young woman in the sundress. The casual dismissal, the public humiliation, the suggestions about shopping at department stores, all of it had been witnessed and recorded by someone with the power to destroy her entirely. As the magnitude of her mistake became clear, Victoria felt physically sick. She had treated the fiancé of one of the world's most powerful men like garbage, and now that man was systematically dismantling everything she had worked to build. The irony was devastating. She had prided herself on recognizing wealth and status, yet she had completely failed to identify the most important customer who had ever walked into her store. Victoria tried to negotiate, offering apologies and explanations for what she claimed was a misunderstanding. She suggested that the acquisition was an overreaction to a simple customer service issue that could be resolved through other means. However, the Al-Mansouri Holdings representatives made it clear that the decision was final and that further discussion would be pointless. The news broke on financial networks within hours. Industry analysts struggled to explain why a Middle Eastern oil magnate would suddenly enter the luxury fashion retail market through such an aggressive acquisition. Some speculated about diversification strategies or emerging market opportunities, but none could identify the real motivation behind the purchase. Victoria watched the coverage in her office, feeling increasingly isolated as her professional world collapsed around her. Staff members at Meridian Fashion House began receiving termination notices that afternoon. Victoria's management team was dismissed immediately, along with anyone who had participated in or witnessed Maya's humiliation without objection. The only employee who retained her position was Jennifer, who was promoted to store manager and given a substantial salary increase for her professional behavior during the incident. She had no way of knowing that her actions the previous day had triggered a chain of events that would destroy everything she had built over 15 years in the fashion industry. The next morning brought the final humiliation. Khalid al-Mansouri arrived at Meridian Fashion House with Maya on his side, both dressed casually but carrying themselves with unmistakable authority. Victoria watched from her office window as they toured the boutique she no longer owned, Maya pointing out various aspects of the store's layout and design.
The woman, Victoria, had dismissed as unworthy, was now examining her former domain as its new proprietor. When Khalid and Maya entered Victoria's office, the contrast with their previous encounter was stark. Maya wore the same style of simple sundress that had triggered Victoria's initial contempt, but now she carried herself with the confidence of someone who owned everything around her. Khalid remained quietly supportive, letting his fiancée take the lead in their conversation. Maya's first words were not what Victoria expected. Instead of gloating or expressing anger, she simply asked why Victoria had chosen to treat her so cruelly when basic courtesy would have cost nothing. The question hung in the air without accusation or malice, but it cut deeper than any insult could have. Victoria realized she had no good answer because there had been no good reason for her behavior. Victoria attempted to apologize, claiming that she had been having a difficult day and that Maya's treatment had been an aberration from her usual standards. However, Maya quietly pointed out that other customers had been treated with respect during the same period, suggesting that the issue wasn't Victoria's mood, but her assumptions about who deserved consideration. The observation was delivered without cruelty, but its accuracy made it devastating. Khalid spoke for the first time during their meeting, his voice calm, but carrying an undertone that made Victoria understand why he was so successful in business. He explained that he had acquired her company out of spite or revenge, but because he believed businesses should reflect values of respect and inclusion. Under Maya's leadership, the fashion group would serve all customers who appreciated quality and craftsmanship, regardless of their appearance or perceived social status. The transition was swift and professional. Victoria was given a generous severance package and positive references for future employment. But she was also made to understand that her reputation in luxury retail was permanently damaged. Word of the acquisition's true motivation had spread throughout the industry, and other business owners were quietly reconsidering their own customer service practices to avoid similar consequences. Maya's first decision as the new owner was to implement comprehensive training programs for all employees across the fashion group's properties. Staff members would learn to treat every customer with dignity and respect, understanding that true luxury service meant making people feel valued rather than excluded. The changes were presented as business improvements rather than punishments, but their connection to Victoria's downfall was unmistakable. The boutique's atmosphere transformed almost immediately under Maya's ownership. Customers who had previously felt intimidated by the store's exclusive reputation began returning, drawn by reports of improved service and welcoming staff. Sales actually increased as word spread that Meridian Fashion House had become a place where quality mattered more than appearances. Jennifer thrived in her new role as store manager, implementing Maya's vision with enthusiasm and skill. She hired diverse staff members who shared the owner's commitment to treating all customers with respect, creating a work environment that was both professional and genuinely caring. The contrast with Victoria's management style was dramatic and positive. Victoria struggled to find new employment in the fashion industry. Her professional network had largely abandoned her, and potential employers were reluctant to associate with someone who had provoked such a spectacular business disaster. She eventually accepted a position with a small regional retailer, her salary and responsibilities a fraction of what she had previously enjoyed. The story of Maya's treatment and Khalid's response became a cautionary tale throughout the luxury retail industry. Business owners began reviewing their customer service policies and training programs, understanding that discrimination and exclusion could have consequences far beyond hurt feelings. The incident sparked broader conversations about prejudice and assumption in high-end retail environments. Maya found unexpected satisfaction in her new role as a business owner. She had never imagined herself in the fashion industry, but she discovered a talent for understanding what customers truly wanted from luxury shopping experiences. Her background in photography gave her an eye for visual presentation, while her personal experience with discrimination made her passionate about inclusive service. 6 months after the acquisition, Maya opened the boutique's doors for a special event celebrating the store's transformation. Former customers returned alongside new ones, creating a diverse and vibrant atmosphere that would have been impossible under Victoria's management. The evening was a success by every measure, proving that business success and ethical treatment of customers were not mutually exclusive goals. Victoria watched news coverage of the event from her small apartment, seeing Maya surrounded by happy customers and successful staff members. The woman she had dismissed as unworthy had not only survived the encounter, but had used it as motivation to create something better. The lesson was clear. Underestimating people based on appearances was not just morally wrong, but potentially catastrophic for those who made such mistakes. Khalid's acquisition strategy became a case study in business schools, although most analyses focused on the financial aspects rather than the personal motivation behind the purchase. Students learned about rapid market entry and hostile takeovers without understanding that the entire operation had been triggered by a single act of unkindness towards someone the acquirer loved. Maya kept Victoria's termination letter framed in her office, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of how quickly circumstances can change. She never expressed satisfaction at her former tormentor's downfall. but she used the experience to ensure that no customer would ever face similar treatment in any business she controlled. The incident had taught her that power carried responsibility, and she was determined to use her influence positively. The fashion group continued to grow under Maya's leadership, expanding into new markets and developing innovative approaches to luxury retail. Her success proved that businesses could thrive while maintaining ethical standards and treating all stakeholders with respect. The company became known throughout the industry for its inclusive culture and exceptional customer service. Victoria's career never recovered from the incident. She remained in retail, but at a much reduced level. Her former authority and influence permanently diminished. The experience had taught her harsh lessons about the consequences of prejudice and cruelty, though whether she truly understood those lessons remained unclear. Her downfall served as a warning to others about the risks of treating people badly based on assumptions and appearances. Years later, Maya would reflect on how a single moment of humiliation had changed both their lives forever. Victoria had lost everything she had built through decades of work, while Maya had discovered strengths and capabilities she never knew she possessed. The incident had revealed character in both women, Victoria's willingness to demean others for her own satisfaction, and Maya's determination to transform negative experiences into positive change. The story became part of business folklore, though many details were lost or changed in repeated tellings. The core message remained consistent. Treating people with cruelty based on their appearance or perceived status could have consequences far beyond what anyone might expect. In Maya's case, those consequences arrived with the full of billions of dollars and the determination of someone who refused to accept injustice quietly. Maya never regretted calling Khalid that day or his decision to acquire Victoria's company. The experience had shown her that love sometimes meant protecting those you care about from cruelty, even when that protection came at enormous cost. More importantly, it had given her the opportunity to prove that businesses could succeed while treating everyone with dignity and respect. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.